Audio Jungle. Audio Jungle.
What if I told you that the most powerful currency on earth, the United States dollar, is under a slow, invisible attack, and the attacker is not a Wall Street crash, not a banking collapse, not even a global recession. The threat is coming from thousands of miles away from the Middle East, from Iran. Now you might be wondering, how can Iran, a country under heavy sanctions, possibly damage the economy of the most powerful nation on the planet? Well, that is exactly what we are going to break down today. This story involves oil, gold, secret deals, global power shifts, and a financial system that has controlled the entire world for over 80 years. Stay with me, because by the end of this video, you will see the global economy in a completely different light. To understand how Iran is shaking the American economy today, we first need to go back in time, way back, to the year 1944. The world was still in the grip of World War II. Nations were exhausted, economies were shattered, and global leaders realized that once the war ended, the world would need a stable economic system to rebuild and grow together. So a historic conference was organized. It was called the Bretton Woods Conference. It took place in a small town called Bretton Woods in New Hampshire, United States. Representatives from 44 countries gathered there. They sat around tables and debated one massive question: what would the future of global money look like? What currency would the world use for international trade? What system would hold it all together? At that point, the United States made a bold claim. It said, "We hold nearly 2/3 of all the gold reserves in the entire world. Our economy is the strongest. Our currency should be the anchor of the new global system." And so, a decision was made. Every participating country agreed to peg its national currency to the US dollar. The dollar, in turn, was pegged to gold. This meant one thing very clearly. If you wanted to do business internationally, if you wanted to trade across borders, you needed dollars. The United States dollar became the undisputed king of global finance. And from that moment on, the world started revolving around the American dollar. Countries began stockpiling dollars the way kings once stockpiled gold. It was a new era, an era of dollar dominance. But like every empire, this system too had cracks forming beneath the surface, cracks that would eventually widen into something much more dangerous. Under the Bretton Woods system, there was a very specific promise made by the United States to the rest of the world. The promise was simple and powerful. 1 ounce of gold would equal 35 US dollars. That was the fixed rate. So if any country, let us say India, or France, or Japan, accumulated $35 through trade, they could go to the United States and exchange those dollars for 1 ounce of pure gold. It was a guarantee, a contract, a trust mechanism that gave the dollar its credibility. For years, this system worked beautifully. Countries trusted the dollar because behind every dollar stood a real, tangible amount of gold sitting in American vaults. The world economy grew, trade flourished, and the United States sat at the center of it all like a financial superpower. But then, something started going wrong. The United States became involved in expensive and prolonged wars. The Vietnam War drained billions from the American treasury. The Korean War added more pressure. Covert operations and military involvements around the globe cost even more. The government needed money, lots of it, and the fastest way to get money was to print it. So the printing presses started running overtime. Billions of new dollars flooded into circulation. But here is the critical problem. The gold reserves did not grow at the same pace. There was now far more paper money floating around the world than there was gold to back it up. Countries around the world started accumulating massive piles of US dollars. And slowly, a terrifying question began to emerge. What would happen if all those countries came knocking at America's door at the same time, demanding gold for their dollars? The answer was devastating. The United States simply did not have enough gold to honor that promise. The cracks in the system were no longer hidden. They were about to blow wide open. By 1971, the situation had become untenable. Countries like France, under President Charles de Gaulle, had already started demanding gold in exchange for their accumulated dollars. France literally sent ships across the Atlantic to bring back gold from American vaults. Other nations were watching closely. The pressure was mounting. If multiple countries simultaneously demanded gold, the entire financial system of the United States would collapse. So on August 15th, President Richard Nixon made one of the most consequential announcements in modern economic history. He appeared on national television and declared that the United States would no longer convert dollars into gold. Who'st like that the gold window was slammed shut. This moment became known as the Nixon Shock. It was a unilateral decision, no consultation with other countries, no vote, no negotiation. America simply said, the deal is off. We cannot and will not give you gold for your dollars anymore. Now, this created an enormous problem. Up until that point, countries around the world held dollars because those dollars had a golden guarantee behind them. You could trust the dollar because it represented real gold. But now, the dollar was just paper, just ink on cotton fiber. There was no gold behind it, so the natural question arose, why should anyone in the world continue to hold dollars? Why should nations keep their reserves in a currency that was no longer backed by anything tangible? The United States knew it had to act fast. If countries around the world dumped their dollar reserves, the American economy would spiral into chaos. The dollar would lose its value. Inflation would skyrocket. The entire financial system built over decades would crumble. America needed a new plan, a new anchor, a new reason for the world to keep using the dollar. And what they came up with was nothing short of genius. A deal so powerful that it would control the global economy for the next 50 years and beyond. In 1974, just 3 years after Nixon ended the gold standard, the United States crafted a Secretary of State Henry Kissinger traveled to Saudi Arabia and struck a deal that would reshape global economics forever. The agreement was elegantly simple but incredibly powerful. The United States told Saudi Arabia and other Gulf oil-producing nations, we will provide you with military protection. We will supply you with advanced weapons. We will guarantee your security against any regional threat. In return, you must agree to one condition: sell all your oil exclusively in US dollars. No euros, no yen, no other currency, only dollars. Saudi Arabia agreed. And gradually, so did the other major oil-exporting nations. This arrangement became known as the petrodollar system. And it was think about it, from a global perspective, every single country on this planet needs oil. Oil runs factories. Oil powers transportation. Oil generates electricity. Oil is used to make plastics, medicines, fertilizers. It is literally the bloodstream of the modern global economy. And if all the oil in the world is being sold in dollars, then every country that needs to buy oil must first acquire dollars. Japan needs dollars. Germany needs dollars. India needs dollars. China needs dollars. Brazil needs dollars. This created a permanent, worldwide demand for the US dollar. Even though the dollar was no longer backed by gold, it was now backed by something arguably even more important. Oil? Black gold. The dollar did not just survive the end of the gold standard, it came back stronger than ever. The petrodollar system ensured that the dollar remained the world's reserve currency, the most trusted, most traded, and most powerful currency on Earth. America had replaced gold with oil, and the world had no choice but to play along. Now here is where the petrodollar system gets truly fascinating. It was not just about selling oil in dollars. There was a second part to this arrangement, a recycling mechanism that pumped enormous wealth back into the United States. Here is how it worked. Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, the UAE, Qatar, and other Gulf nations sold their oil and received billions of dollars in return. But what did they do with all those dollars? They could not just keep piles of cash sitting in warehouses, so they invested that money, and most of it went right back into the United States. These oil-rich nations bought U.S. government bonds, which are essentially loans to the American government. They purchased shares in massive American corporations like Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, and Facebook. They invested in American real estate skyscrapers in Manhattan, luxury properties in Los Angeles, commercial developments across the country. They deposited billions into American banks. This created what economists call the petrodollar recycling loop. Oil-producing countries earned dollars from oil sales and then recycled those dollars back into the American economy. This provided the United States with enormous liquidity. It meant the U.S. government could borrow money cheaply because there were always eager buyers for its bonds. It meant American companies had access to foreign investment. It meant U.S. banks had massive deposits they could use to issue loans to businesses and consumers. In many ways, the petrodollar system was like a massive financial engine that kept the American economy running smoothly. It allowed the United States to maintain lower interest rates, fund its military spending, run budget deficits, and still remain the world's most powerful economy. The rest of the world was essentially financing American prosperity, whether they realized it or not. But this engine had a critical vulnerability. It depended entirely on one thing: the security guarantee, and that is exactly where Iran enters the picture. Remember the deal at the heart of the petrodollar system? The United States promised Gulf nations military protection and security in exchange for selling oil exclusively in dollars. That security guarantee was the glue holding the entire arrangement together. Without it, the deal falls apart. And this is where Iran becomes a central player in this economic drama. Iran has been a major geopolitical force in the Middle East for decades. It has engaged in proxy conflicts across the region. It has built alliances with groups in Lebanon, Yemen, Iraq, and Syria. It has developed missile technology that can reach virtually any Gulf state. And crucially, Iran has targeted and threatened the very assets that form the backbone of the petrodollar system. When Iranian-backed forces attack oil refineries, when missiles strike near critical energy infrastructure, when shipping routes through the Strait of Hormuz are threatened, it sends shockwaves through the entire Gulf region. And the Gulf states start asking a very uncomfortable question: where is America? You promised us protection. You promised us security. That was your side of the deal. We have been selling our oil in dollars for decades. We have been investing our wealth in your economy. We have been loyal partners, but when Iran threatens us, when our refineries are hit, when our ships are attacked, you are not able to stop it. This erosion of trust might seem like just a diplomatic issue on the surface, but beneath the surface, it strikes at the very foundation of the petrodollar system. If Gulf nations no longer feel secure under the American umbrella, they have no reason to remain bound by the petrodollar arrangement. And if that arrangement breaks down, the consequences for the U.S. economy could be seismic. This is not just about geopolitics anymore. This is about the survival of the dollar's global supremacy. Let me explain this with a simple analogy that will make the scale of this risk crystal clear. Imagine you have a bank, a large, respected, powerful bank. Thousands of customers have deposited their savings in this bank. Fixed deposits, savings accounts, investment portfolios. The bank takes all that deposited money and uses it to issue loans, fund projects, invest in markets, and generate profits. As long as the customers keep their money in the bank, everything runs smoothly. The bank has liquidity. It has cash flow. It has stability. But now imagine something changes. Imagine a rumor spreads that the bank is no longer safe, that the security system has been compromised, that there are threats to the bank's operations. What happens? Customers start getting nervous. First, a few pull out their money. Then more follow. And if 50% of the customers decide to withdraw their deposits at the same time, the bank collapses. It simply does not have enough liquid cash to return everyone's money. This is what is known as a bank run. Now apply this analogy to the United States. Gulf countries, Saudi Arabia, UAE, Kuwait, Qatar, have invested trillions of dollars in America. In bonds, in stocks, in real estate, in bank deposits. These investments represent a massive chunk of liquidity in the American financial system. If these countries start feeling insecure, if they feel the security guarantee from the U.S. is no longer reliable because of Iranian threats, they might begin pulling their money out. Not all at once, perhaps, but gradually, slowly shifting investments to other markets, moving wealth to China, to Europe, to domestic sovereign wealth projects. And as the money flows out, the American financial system begins to feel the strain. Bond prices could fall. Interest rates could rise. The stock market could suffer. Real estate markets in major cities could see downturns. The very engine that has powered American economic dominance for decades could start sputtering, and all of this triggered not by a financial crisis on Wall Street, but by security failures thousands of miles away in the Persian Gulf. What we have been describing is part of a much larger global trend that economists and geopolitical analysts call it is the gradual movement away from the US dollar as the world's primary reserve currency and trade currency. And Iran's actions in the Middle East are accelerating this trend. Here is the bigger picture. Gulf nations are not just passive observers anymore. They are actively exploring alternatives. Saudi Arabia has held discussions with China about selling oil in Chinese yuan instead of dollars. The UAE has begun settling some trade deals in local currencies. BRIC is the nations. Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa are actively working on creating alternative payment systems that bypass the dollar entirely. Russia already sells much of its oil to China and India in rubles and rupees. China has set up currency swap agreements with dozens of countries around the world. Every time Iran disrupts the Middle East, every time the security guarantee from the United States looks weak, it gives these nations one more reason to diversify away from the dollar. It is not going to happen overnight. The dollar is deeply embedded in global trade, in central bank reserves, in commodity markets. Replacing it entirely would take years, maybe decades. But the momentum is building. Think about it this way. For 80 years, the world has operated under a system where the dollar was supreme. First backed by gold, then backed by oil, always backed by American military power. But now, each of these pillars is being questioned. The gold backing is long gone. The oil backing is under threat from Iranian aggression and shifting Gulf alliances. And American military credibility is being tested every single day. If this continues, if the security promise keeps eroding, if Gulf nations keep diversifying, if BRICS keeps building alternatives, the dollar's dominance could slowly but surely decline. And the day that happens, the entire global economic order as we know it will be fundamentally transformed. Prices in America could rise dramatically. Borrowing costs could soar. The standard of living that Americans have enjoyed for decades, funded in large part by the petrodollar system, could face serious challenges. Conclusion 30 seconds. So there you have it. The full story of how Iran, through its actions in the Middle East, is not just creating a regional security crisis, but is potentially undermining the very financial system that has made America the most powerful economy on earth. The petrodollar system gave the dollar its strength after gold could not, but if the security promise behind that system breaks down, the dollar loses its foundation. Dollarization is no longer a theory. It is happening in real time. The question is not whether the dollar will face challenges. The question is how fast and how severe those challenges will be. Keep watching this space, because the global economic landscape is shifting, and the changes could affect every single one of us. If you found this breakdown valuable, like, subscribe, and share, because understanding these forces is the first step to being prepared for what is coming.